Thank you, Dr. Rutledge. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Have I got a motion to approve the agenda?
I so move.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. No discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. The next item is the approval of the minutes of April 24th, 2024.
I will make a motion to approve.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes and approval of the minutes is done. The next item is I'm pleased to announce the employee of the quarter. This is for the July to September 2024, the first quarter of fiscal year 2025, and the employee of the quarter is Carla Alexander. Carla is a retirement specialist for the Service Retirement Quality Assurance. She shows dedication in her role, especially toward new employees. Her strong work ethic and positive attitude ensures that she completes her work in a timely fashion and is able to not only answer the questions of the new employees, but to ensure that they have a good understanding and comprehension of the new information. For this reason and more, the PERS Board of Trustees is proud to present the Employee of the Quarter Award to Carla Alexander.
Madam Chairman, while most of Ms. Green's employees are staff is in here, I want to repeat what I said in the administrative committee meeting to thank them and Ms. Green for what they have done in processing applications this year. In 20 years that I've been here, this is the first time I had one phone call. That's it. And that person just turned in their application 2 weeks ago, and when I asked about it, it was already processed. So thank you all, because you all have done exceptional work.
Thank you again. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the report of the Administrative Committee. Dr. Randy McCoy.
Thank you. The Administrative Committee did meet for approximately 2 hours or more this morning, and we have several items that we're going to be submitting to the full board for approval. The Administrative Committee did approve the recommendation of staff this morning for the fiscal year 2026 initial administrative budget request, and I bring this approval from the committee in the form of a motion to the full board.
That motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes.
Second item that we discussed was Regulation 60, and the Administrative Committee this morning did approve that recommendation, and that was for the approval of the change in the contribution rates and other modifications of language that are needed to get this regulation into compliance with newly passed state law. And I bring that approval from the committee to the full board in the form of a motion.
I would second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes.
Third item that we discussed was Regulation 34 concerning reemployment after retirement. This deals specifically with teachers and was passed this last legislative session. The Administrative Committee did approve that recommendation and brings this approval in the form of a motion to the full board.
Second.
That motion, we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes.
Fourth item that the board considered, that the administrative committee considered this morning was board travel authorization. There's about 6 or 7 meetings that the board has an opportunity to travel for further education and training during the year. And the administrative committee did approve that recommendation by staff and brings this approval in the form of a motion to the full board.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
The fifth item discussed in the administrative committee was the state employees representative election ballot. The administration committee did approve that recommendation and approve that ballot and brings that approval. And I bring this approval in the form of a motion to the full board.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. The ballot passes.
Sixth item under discussion this morning in the committee was actuarial contract. The actuarial contracts that we're discussing or did discuss had to do with the last legislative session where we would employ 2 other actuaries and for recommendations so that we would have 3 actuaries looking at things that we would be looking to recommend to the legislature. The administrative committee did approve the recommendation of GRS and Chiron as those 2 actuaries, and I bring this approval in the form of a motion to the full board. And also I would note that the scope that will be negotiated and in the contract will be reported back to the board as well.
Okay. So we have that in the form of a motion?
That's a motion, yes.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
Seventh item under discussion this morning was the actuarial modeling and stress testing. We did have a representative from Kevin R. McDonald, our actuary. We went through 4 or several different scenarios where we discussed where we were at the beginning of the legislative session, where we were at the end of the legislative session, and some possible things that could or might happen in the future. But all of that is pure speculation because we won't start having the real numbers until after the end of this month, when we will close our books at June 30th. And there was no action taken on that. That was all information. And a good and healthy discussion was held about all. So that would be the conclusion of the administrative committee's report.
Thank you, Dr. McCoy. Now, the next item on the agenda is the report of Claims Committee. Mr. Bill Benson.
Madam Chairman, the Claims Committee met this morning and took up the recommendation for the dissolution of the Tunica County Health Care Authority and voted to allow that dissolution. As we understand it, the 15 or so employees are going to be moving to the Board of Supervisors, so they will remain in the PERS system, but the Health Care Authority will dissolve, and I'd place that in the form of the motion.
Hearing the motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
The only other thing brought before the Claims Committee was the information that Jefferson County Hospital is now up to date and is current. So there was no need to take any action there. With that, that concludes the report.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. Now, the next item on the agenda is the report of the Defined Contribution Committee. Dr. Brian Rutledge.
Thank you. The Defined Contribution Committee met yesterday and only took one action that requires board approval, and that was the second reading for final adoption of the optional retirement plan document. Those updates were to the contribution rate to make it match the new PERS contribution rate. and I bring that forward in the form of a motion.
Hearing the motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. The motion passes.
No other business.
Thank you, Dr. Rutledge. Now for the report of the investment committee. Mr. Kelly Breland was not with us. I'll cover the items that we discussed yesterday. We met yesterday, and we did receive a market update as of May 31st, $33.5 billion in assets, return of 9.8. That was as of May 31st. I think we're hovering around 11.5, hoping that holds until June 30th. We're just a few days away. The only items for action is the PERS watch list, and the staff recommends to add Bailey Gifford, ACWI, ex-US All Cap, and Harding Loebner Global Equity to the PERS watch list. Do I have a motion to approve staff recommendations?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. The next item that needs a vote is the staff recommendation to change the policy private equity benchmark from the S&P 500 plus 3% to the Cambridge Associate private equity benchmark, and this be done retroactively through the entire fiscal year. Do I have a motion for staff recommendation?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair, I do have a question. I apologize. I was listening yesterday, traveling, when they went through this portion. I just wanted to make sure that I heard it correctly or understood it. Did they ever disclose how far they missed the benchmark?
Well, most of it yesterday was not so much about how missing the benchmark. It was just a discussion around trying to recommend what would be a better benchmark, more representative of the private nature and the private equity that we have. The discussion was more around that, as I recall. Of course, we can talk about it further now, and Charles and I can talk with you more now or offline. Now, part of the discussion was, though, in how using the public markets, with the volatility in public markets, you have those variations, good and bad. So that's definitely in the information. But yesterday was really more about changing the benchmark as opposed to comparison. But we did have that information that was reported out for each asset class.
Well, I understand that. But my question was, the commentary was, we've missed the benchmark. We don't think this is a good benchmark. We want to change the benchmark, and we want to make it retroactive for the entire year that's about to close in 3 days. I just didn't hear any, and if y'all may have discussed this at length before, and I apologize, but if we're changing a benchmark, we're missing. But then someone said, in the long run, they're not that much different. I think it was 15.3 versus 15 maybe.
Sure.
But we just started this in 06. And in 08, it was 5% of the asset allocation. In 13, it's 8% of the asset allocation. And in 22, it's 10% of the asset allocation. So it's climbing. So if we change the benchmark, are we looking to add to the asset allocation in private equity? I just, it was kind of bang bang for me. And like I said, I apologize. I was riding down the road listening. But if that's 10% of the assets, if I understand the pass out correctly, and there's not a standard benchmark in the industry, we're changing it, or the vote would be to change to a new benchmark and to make it retroactive to the prior year. Is that correct?
Yes and no. Let me just comment on it. First of all, I appreciate the question and where you're coming from, and excellent observation and point. And it has been an ongoing discussion throughout the various meetings and all. One thing just to emphasize, and you probably already know this or heard some of it, but the intent behind it, for myself, the Chief Investment Officer, Callan, all of them, is to make a recommendation to the board to have the best available or a better benchmark that's more reflective of that asset class. So that's the intent behind it. Whether it's good or bad, it's not to make us look better, make us look worse, or anything like that. It's to try to have the best available benchmark. and try to just continuously improve on that. The retroactive part, great point, and there's some terminology and semantics there, but what that's really accomplishing is once we do the final, what they were talking about is the volatility we have in comparing to the public markets. And over time, I think Charles might have mentioned it, that if you look long-term, the Cambridge and the S&P plus such and such, it kind of balances out. But short-term, one way or the other with the big swings, with the nature of private equity and the lag, you see big differences just from a volatility standpoint. So allocation, this wouldn't change that. It'd just be changing the official benchmark, with the S&P 500 information still being available, but changing the official benchmark, and all the retroactive is doing is allowing us to use it for the 6/30 report. That's the main thing there.
Would it cause them to meet the benchmark this year?
That I don't know the outcome, because we don't know what the results is as of June 30. I will say this, though, and I can't quote the numbers offhand, but for the last several years, sometimes good, sometimes behind, with the volatility, like think right now, and Charles, you may know this off the top of your head, but with the increase in the public markets, that's gonna be far more. So I'm sure we'd be behind on the private equity side right now compared to the public markets. What will it look like to the Cambridge, I don't know that we know,
Yeah.
since it's not due.
Like a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
because of
Excuse
high
me, Charles.
volatility.
Would you
Yeah,
move up
get a
the
microphone,
microphone, please, so I can hear you?
We would be below right now because of the S&P, the growth.
A couple of years ago, because of high volatility recently in public markets, and the scope of the two different markets is so different today than it was back in 2006. 2 years ago, private equity greatly outperformed the benchmark, and it was an appropriate outperformance number. So what we're trying to do is eliminate those near-term discrepancies in how we're measuring the performance of our private equity managers to a more relevant market to get better risk evaluations of those managers. That's it. So over the longer term, the difference between the S&P 500 plus 3% and the Cambridge benchmark, after you smooth out that volatility over time, is de minimis. So we're not trying to change how we appear in our benchmark, over time. All we're trying to do is put a more relevant benchmark in place so we can better properly evaluate how well or how bad our managers may be doing
In that area.
in that area. That's it.
Okay.
So we're not looking at this moment to increase our allocation to that sector or anything like that. It's just trying to get a better measuring stick. Now that the market's more mature and there are better measuring tools available, we want to use them. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, and then of course for I guess the opportunity cost is how it was referred to yesterday, the S&P plus a premium or whatnot. Of course, that'd still be available and we could calculate that or share that if we needed to.
I did not have this information from me yesterday that we had grown from 5 to 8 to 10%
Sure.
asset allocation. And that if, we changed the benchmark, but yet the long term is not de minimis, I think is the word you used. That's fine. That was my concern, is changing it and changing it retroactive. It just seemed if we were going to do it going forward, it would.
Well, doing it retroactive, we're not going to do it like now going retroactive all the way back to the start of the program. It's just putting it in place so we have the same benchmark that we're going to use for the entire year's measurement for this current year.
But it just so happens we're at the end of the year.
Well,
So-
yeah, it's
so
happening within the
retroactive
year,
for the whole
yes.
year. Okay.
And we're just trying to head off, I don't want our manager's performance appearance to look better than it should or worse than it should. I want an accurate measurement of how they're doing. That's it.
Okay. Because I think that's, and I don't want to speak for the legislature, I'll just speak for myself and sitting in that finance meeting when Executive Director Higgins comes over, people's eyes are drawn to pluses and minuses. They see you missed your benchmark, you made your benchmark. So if somebody asks me, why'd you change the benchmark? I want to be able to say, well, we missed the benchmark, but because of the market and the nature of equities and how they're measured across the board, I just want to be able to answer that question.
Certainly, and I appreciate that. And this should, I would say this is a step in the direction of helping to answer that, because you'd have a more reflective benchmark.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Charles.
So you've got the motion and the second. Okay, any further discussion? None. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. And we received a few miscellaneous updates, but other than that, that concludes the report of the investment committee. Now moving along to the next agenda item, retiree insurance advisory committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This, some information on this is behind tab J. I have one recommendation for an appointment to the Retiree Insurance Advisory Committee. This is a committee established to advise staff and the board on the PERS-sponsored retiree life insurance and Medicare supplement plan. And we have a vacancy, so I come forward with a recommendation, and I would like to recommend Ms. Laura Jackson. Again, that's behind tab J, and would recommend her for this term that ends October 31st of 2026. Some of you may be familiar with her, but Ms. Jackson's a retired, of course, employee. Last served as executive director of DFA, which includes the administration and oversight of the state health insurance plan, and was a member of the board and the chair of that board. So has that insurance knowledge, and I believe also earlier than that at times worked, among other places, at the Treasurer's office, and may have served at times as a proxy, I think,
She was here often.
over the years. So we think she'd be a good appointment, and she has.
Whose place does she take?
Now that I don't know, that would be before me. She was here, she was a DFA when I joined PERS, and then she retired.
You mean on the
On the
insurance?
committee, yeah.
Oh, whose place will she be
Is that
taking?
Yvonne?
No, it's not Yvonne.
Joel Jones is who she's taking.
Yeah.
He rolled off the committee.
Is
was
she
an
still, is
attorney.
she still at Clinton now?
Yeah,
I mean,
he
is she
worked
still
with
at,
us, yeah.
Yes, sir. He was an attorney at Office of Insurance. That's correct.
I believe she's still at Mississippi
still at
College.
Mississippi College?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's at MC.
She is.
She's agreed to serve, and if approved, and that's my recommendation.
She'd be an excellent choice. I'd make that motion.
Yeah,
Second.
yeah.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion in 2 seconds. Okay. All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes.
Thank you. The next one is behind tab K, and this is some information on the municipal retirement plans cost of living certification. This is something we do around this time each year. You can see on some of that information that's there and provided previously, it gives the background on each municipality, a brief description of the resolution, whether it be a standing resolution or a recent resolution, and where applicable, if it was certified or not by the actuary. And this is something that we do this time each year, and the staff recommends approval of the municipal retirement plans cost of living adjustments.
Do I have a motion?
So move.
Can I have a second?
A second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
All right, the next item is behind tab L. This is the recommendation I bring on behalf of the Disability Appeals Committee, where we have 4 cases there we recommend on behalf, again, of the Disability Appeals Committee for board approval, and they are PERS case numbers 24-01, 24-05, 24-06, and 24-08.
Do I have a motion?
Move to approve recommendations.
All right, hearing a motion, do I have a second?
A second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Next on the agenda is a retiree report behind tab M. You'll see there the number and dollar amounts associated with the retiree payroll in different formats. On the first one of that report, you can see that the monthly payroll for June is over 209 million, and the total amount is now up to well over, for an annual basis, of over 3 billion. I will mention that when I see the 209 million and some of the discussion from earlier, I will say, as far as the one-time $110 million, to put that in perspective, even though the $110 million is appreciated and it's helpful, you can also see that it's only roughly about half of 1 month payroll. So it's helpful, but that's to put it in context. And then the total amount's now, again, well up over 3 billion. You see the number of retirees to over 120,000 now. If you continue to flip to page 3 of that retiree report, you'll see over to the right-hand column, roughly a little over 1,000 retirees being added to the payroll in the month of June. That goes back to some of the processing discussion that we covered earlier. And in the subsequent pages, you see the similar numbers in a different format. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about it, but otherwise would ask for your approval of the retiree report.
And I'm assuming we'll see a significant increase between June and July.
That's typically the case. That's right. You see the 1,000 or so there for June. If you look at the top of that page, you'll see July being a large number as well. And it's definitely the peak season, I guess, from January or February all through. And the reason for that's the nature of the system to some extent and the nature of the cost of living adjustment. Retirees, as you know, have to be retired for one fiscal year, full fiscal year, in order to start the COLA. And so that combined with the just as one example, the end of the school year, the June and July is a busy time because you need to be on there by July 1st.
Just for fun, that average benefit amount is 27,000.
That's right, a little under 27,000. That's correct, including the cost of living adjustment.
Do I have a motion to approve the retiree report?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the retiree report passes.
The next item behind the next tab, tab N, I believe, is the standard investment report provided in the usual format prior to the meeting. Since we had a great deal of discussion yesterday in the investment committee, I won't spend much time on that unless you all have questions. But it does have some additional information about the securities lending program. And then the last page, the fund transfers throughout the year and since the last meeting. And if there are no questions, I'll ask for your approval of the investment report and any trades and transactions since the last meeting.
One comment is, through the end of May, our security lending management summary is about $12.6 million. And that's good, and that'll go up some, and that would be about, I'm estimating, a little over 2/3 of our requested compensation that we earn. And I want to thank the investment guys for following that, making sure that money is available and is put to use, and it earns us income. So moved. I make a motion to approve this.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the investment report passes.
All right, and just to close out, I guess, on the remaining items that I have, this is training and continuing education opportunities, similar to what Dr. McCoy mentioned earlier. You see there something from NCTR, NASRA, and then another one from NCTR. And I would just say something to echo some of his previous comments is oftentimes they're really good conferences, a lot of good information from economists, actuaries, investment advisors, and others. But also you learn a great deal about what's going on in other states. We have a lot of shared challenges and similar circumstances, so it's helpful there. And then I do want to mention one thing that at the top there that you may want to consider this year perhaps, or maybe in another year, is there's this one from NCTR that is designed especially for trustees and only trustees. So that may be something that I would recommend you consider at some point in the future. But other than
We've had representatives to attend that in the past. Doctor, whose place I took, I think went every year, didn't he, Bill?
Dr. Ballou went regularly, I think, and
so that may be something to consider, but that's it. That's all I have, and be happy to answer any questions.
Okay.
Or I can move on, whichever you prefer, to the next.
That requires no vote, so we'll move on to the election of the 2025 PERS board chair.
And on that, just briefly, the board protocol on that is that the chair, vice chair, and immediate past chair meet to discuss who to recommend to the board as the next vice chair, and then, of course, the board discusses and votes as appropriate. And with that, I'll turn it back to the chair.
Okay, with me being the current chair, with Kelly being the current vice chair, moving up in July, and the prior being Bill Benson, we've all had conversations. Kelly and I had extensive conversations, and we both put before you Bill Benson's name. He has abstained from that, but I will turn it over to him to see if he has any comments.
No, that motion was made without me being there, I will say that.
Hey, short straw. You've been chair how many times before? 3?
3, yes, sir.
Well trained, well experienced.
On average, that's about once every 4 years. I think that's about right. That's kind of the way the president's stuff works, isn't it?
Does that require a motion?
It does.
It will eventually, yes. The board will need to, the full board vote on the vice chair. Mr. Breland will be the chair, and then she'll be electing the vice chair.
Okay, so
I make the motion, Bill Benson be the vice chair for the next fiscal year.
do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed?
That may be me.
Hearing
We'll report back as to whether that's me at the time.
I want to comment on the fine work of our outgoing chairman, of what a wonderful job she has done, and we appreciate that, your work.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
That doesn't require a motion.
And if anyone has anything else, going once, going twice. Well, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ayes and repeat.